through pure skill, blasting into the third stage of qualifying at a brilliant pace. The day was improved even further for Alex after he was promoted to P6, this his best grid position in over 2 years. Now for my team of qualifying, and it's Alpine. Not only did Alpine equal their best qualifying of the season, but Fernando Alonso was promoted to P3 due to penalties, putting him in a prime position to possibly take his first podium of the season. And finally, for my struggle of qualifying, and it's Kevin Magnussen. Haas hoped to get into Q2 with the Danish driver, as Mick Schumacher would take a grid penalty, sending him to the back of the grid. But K-Mag did not perform, with only 18th behind Nicholas Latifi, whilst his penalty-stricken teammate progressed to Q2. This could have been a very profitable qualifying session for K-Mag, with so many penalties coming into effect, but it would only be 12th on the grid come race day. Kevin now had work to do if he wanted to score points. So it was Max Verstappen who took the 29th victory of his Formula 1 career, his 9th victory this season, his 3rd win in a row, his 2nd win in a row at Spa, and his 2nd win in a row from 10th or lower on the grid. But not only did Max extend his championship lead over Leclerc to 98 points, but his teammate Sergio Perez made it Red Bull's 4th 1-2 finish of the season. That's Red Bull's best 14 rounds of first 14 rounds of a season ever. Just one more 1-2 finish this year would mean Red Bull's best season in terms of 1-2s ever. Sergio Perez has also now surpassed Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship and already has the most points of any season in his entire career, with 8 rounds still left to race. This is how it happened. Checo had a very slow getaway from P2, and he dropped down to 5th at the first corner. However, a collision between Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton ahead of the Mexican at Le Comte would mean that he resecured his P2 starting grid position, behind the fast-starting Carlos Sainz, who would end up in P3. Replays showed that Lewis squeezed Alonso on the exit of the corner, sending the 7-time world champion's car flying into the air. Fernando Alonso was not happy at all after this collision, throwing some shade upon Lewis and saying that he only knew how to start from first on the grid. Lewis later blamed the incident on Fernando being in his blind spot and admitted to making a mistake. Lewis also landed in some hot water after the Grand Prix, when the stewards reprimanded the Brit for refusing to go to the medical centre to be tested for concussion. This crash culminated in Hamilton retiring from the race, his first DNF of the season, followed by his former Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas, who was tagged by Nicholas Latifi in the second sector, and found himself beached in the gravel. The GOAT managed to continue. Verstappen had managed to pass 6 cars in the opening lap melee, and looked utterly dominant after a short safety car stint to clear away the 2 stricken cars. The Belgian-born driver going down the inside of Daniel Ricciardo for P6 at the bus stop chicane. He then swept past Vettel and Alonso in consecutive laps, and was already eyeing up the podium places before lap 10, taking P3 on only the 8th lap of the race. Carlos Sainz pitted for the first time on lap 12, whilst Max Verstappen moved into the lead at Le Comte. 14 places in 12 laps. Carlos showed pace after the pit stop, with moves on both Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel at the final chicane, with Perez pitting on lap 15, coming out in front of a flying Leclerc. Max was the next to pit a lap later, promoting Carlos Sainz back into the leading position, but only 2 laps after his pit stop, Max Verstappen struck back, making the overtake work on Sainz before the first chicane. Sergio Perez did the same on lap 21 and moved into second, making it a 1-2 for Red Bull. After a short stint on the softs, Carlos pitted for the second time on lap 26, Sergio Perez doing the same 2 laps later, and maintaining his slender lead over the Spaniard thanks to a 2.2 second stop from the Red Bull pit crew. Max Verstappen was the next of the front runners to come into the box on lap 31, and despite a stop 6/10 longer than his teammates, Max Verstappen still came out with a nearly 8-second gap back to Checo. The Red Bulls cruised into the distance, but the same definitely can't be said for Ferrari man Carlos Sainz, who faced high pressure from 4th place George Russell in the closing stages. It's only thanks to a mistake from George in the final 5 laps that Russell didn't secure his 3rd podium on the bounce. Thanks to this podium from Sainz, his first at Spa-Francorchamps, which had previously been an unhappy hunting ground for the now Ferrari driver, who has retired 4 times in Belgium in the past, Carlos Sainz has moved 1 point ahead of George Russell in the drivers' standings to 4th, while the Mercedes driver's 4th place means that the Silver Arrows left a race weekend without silverware for the first time since Monaco. The team is also now 41 points behind Ferrari in the Drivers' Championship. Now for 5th and 6th place, and there was yet more disastrous strategy calls coming the way of Charles Leclerc in this race. The Monegasque was forced to pit on lap 4 after complaining about smoke coming off his front right tyre, falling to the back of the field. However, the 5-time race winner maintained his composure, dispatching both AlphaTauris in consecutive laps. In fact, after the first round of pit stops had taken place for the rest of the field, Charles had managed to get himself up all the way into P4, but was swiftly swallowed up by George Russell. In one of the more comical moments of the race, Ferrari themselves asked Leclerc which tyres he should be going onto, showing the extent to which the Scuderia were doubting themselves over the strategy calls. Both Leclerc and Fernando Alonso pitted on lap 26, the veteran passing Zhou and the 2 McLarens, whilst the youngster fought with the 2-time world champion's teammate Ocon, before the Ferrari driver fought past Lance Stroll as well for 5th. So, in the final laps of the Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc was comfortably in P5, and Fernando had 6th place secured. But Ferrari completely miscalculated their pit strategy again, with Leclerc pitting for softs on lap 43 to go for the fastest lap at the final opportunity. However, Ferrari released Charles back into the race behind Fernando Alonso. So now Leclerc had to fight to get back into the top 5. Thankfully managing to do so at Lecomte, but not even securing the fastest lap, which was the whole reason why Charles had pitted to the first place. But to add salt to the healing wound, after the race was concluded, Leclerc was given a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane during the unnecessary Ferrari pit stop, dropping him back down to 6th. And to cap things off on another dreadful day for Leclerc, he exceeded the pit lane limit by only 1 km/h. This top 5 for Fernando is his best result in Spa since 2013, and his joint best finish of the season. It also moves him ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the drivers' standings by 5 points, which, if he can maintain, would be the best position that he has achieved in the Drivers' Championship in 8 years. Esteban Ocon made it Alpine's 4th double points finish of the season, and the team's best performance all year with a hard-fought 7th place, from 16th on the grid, in which Ocon performed 2 astounding double overtaking manoeuvres. The first at the bus stop chicane on lap 17, on Daniel Ricciardo and Alex Albon, and the second on lap 36, as the Frenchman snuck around the outside of a squabbling Sebastian Vettel and Pierre Gasly at Lecomte. This P7 moves the Frenchman within 12 points of midfield rival Lando Norris, who scored no points on Sunday, and also that Esteban maintains his now 5-season point-scoring streak at Spa. Sebastian Vettel converted his P10 start into a P8 finish, leapfrogging the German ahead of both Gasly and Ricciardo in the drivers' standings. And it could have been even better for Seb, who managed to move into P5 on the opening lap, pitting on lap 15 and moving up the field once more, overtaking Alex Albon only a lap later. The Aston Martin driver pitted with 10 laps to go, only overtaking Alex Albon a lap later. And he cruised home to 8th after that. Pierre Gasly took his first points finish since Baku as well, after starting from the pit lane due to an electrical fault. And Alex Albon managed to snag the last points position, his first points since Miami, moving him ahead of Lance Stroll in the standings. The Thai driver withstood pressure from the grid penalty contingent of Norris, Tsunoda and Zhou, Lance Stroll in the mix for the final points position as well, in 11th. This means that Yuki has extended his streak of non-point scoring races to 8, and that Lando Norris has broken his own streak of 4-point scoring races in succession. Daniel Ricciardo finished 15th for the second weekend in a row, not the comeback that he would have wanted from a difficult week, and Kevin Magnussen was P16, the Dane still only having scored points once at Spa in his career. Mick Schumacher took his worst finish since Imola, and Nicholas Latifi, for actually only the first time this year, check the stats, was last of the finishers. Now for my driver of the race, and it's just got to be Max Verstappen. He carved his way through the field like a hot knife through butter, managing to get into the lead of the race by only lap 12 from a P14 grid slot. It was a champion's drive in every sense of the word, and, as I said last week, his inevitable championship victory will be well deserved. At this rate, he could be wrapping up by Japan. Next, for my team of the race, and Alpine my pick. Both drivers had brilliant races on Sunday, with Fernando coming back from that collision with Lewis to finish in the top 5, and Ocon having one of his best races of his career, from 16th to 7th, with 2 double overtakes sprinkled in there. What a performance from Alpine, who now find themselves 20 points ahead of rivals McLaren, who were pointless this weekend. And finally, for my struggle of the race, and sadly, it's Nicholas Latifi. After a desultory qualifying, Nicholas was promoted to 11th place on the grid. However, he fell back at the very start of the race, going wide in the second sector, and putting an end to Valtteri Bottas's race. He was forced to pit for a new rear ring after this, and, unlike Leclerc, he was unable to storm through the field, and was last of the finishers. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Tune in next week for a review of round 15 at Zandvoort.